Hello, 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 hello. It's Robert Phoenix here. How are you, mates? Hey, what's happening out there? It is Thursday morning, another dreary day. Although yesterday it turned out to be rather nice. Sun came out, we had a nice little breeze, and then all of a sudden we saw those fuzzy little lines in the sky start to appear. And guess what? Lo and behold, we've got gray skies the next day. Yes, we are now in the cycle of geoengineering. It is the fall-winter cycle where the geoengineers migrate up from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere and take advantage of the cover of gray skies and a suppressed immune system due to the lack of natural vitamin D content in the sun. So one of the things that you can do is make sure you get high quality vitamin D in your life, either through vegetables or a supplement. Generally, liquid supplements are the best as they are more assimilable. So be sure to take care of your immune system and your body and your health. It is the vehicle for which we have a robust and conscious relationship with physical reality. If you don't have that, trust me, life gets difficult, and you don't know what it's like until your health starts to go south, and then all of a sudden you become health aware, or you may be like one of many millions of Americans who actually wind up going to the doctor and getting help, getting assistance, getting some kind of medication for whatever ails them, which is, generally speaking, never worked for me. It's kind of a cul-de-sac, kind of a dead end. And a lot of people, think their relationship with the medical industry is like my relationship with going to the health food store. Going to Central Market to go get some supplements. That's their Central Market. That's their supplement store. That's where they go for it, right? A, because they don't know any better, and B, because there's always this weird relationship with doctors and authority. And I've noticed this with my mother for years. Older people really get into this. Like the doctor is right next to the priest in terms of their relationship, trust, kind of handing their power over because they're the high priest of medicine. It's the same kind of deal. And they'd much rather do that because in some ways it kind of validates their experience. It validates their life, that they're doing the right thing. They're going to the right person. They're getting the expert advice. All those. But it's even more than that. There's kind of an almost religious obeisance to going to the doctor and participating in mainstream medicine. Anyway, get your vitamin D on. Hey, how about those Houston Astros? I really thought that LA was going to win, and then I remembered Yu Darvish was pitching. Like, oh boy, that's trouble. Yu Darvish is an interesting character. His father is Iranian. He's Persian. His mother's Japanese. I bet you Yu Darvish is one of the rare Persian Japanese people on the planet. It's not a group of people, at least in my estimation. I don't know. Maybe there's a robust Persian Japanese population somewhere, but I would assume that he's probably pretty rare in some ways to that extent. I once met a bus driver one time back in the old days when I was doing pickup work, part-time work back in the 90s to supplement my career as a budding tarot reader. I met this bus driver who was part Aborigine and part Kenyan. Boy, that guy was interesting. And he said that his mother was she was a maid for Mae West. So this guy actually kind of grew up knowing an older version of Mae West. Interesting stuff. Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is what's happening with November 4th and this planned kind of takedown. Well, I don't know if it's takedown. This is what's being pushed, is that there's going to be a massive Antifa demonstration on the streets of America. More than a demonstration, we're talking there could be riots, there could be confrontations with Trump supporters, the deplorables. And George Soros has recently pumped over, what is it, $1 billion into his main group here, which is the Open Society. And then the Open Society has all these umbrella groups and splinter organizations. Now, one of the things that Soros, and I've talked about this before, one of the things that Soros is really good for is that he is like the straw man for the Rothschilds. That's what Soros kind of is, right? Because if you have George Soros out there as being the boogeyman, what does that do? It turns the attention away from the Rothschild family and the Rothschild crime syndicate, who are the wealthiest. They're the wealthiest group that we know of on the planet. There may be, families of Italian black nobility that might rival the Rothschilds in terms of wealth, having acquired wealth, during the Roman era, and continuing to amass wealth, but in a very kind of private way. They may be able to rival the Rothschilds. We don't know, but we do know what the Rothschilds do own on paper. We don't know what they own off paper, because that's a whole other industry. A lot of these people think that, these guys, all they do is really just legitimate business. Like they own trains, own TV stations, they own airlines, they own newspapers. They've got their hands in all these different multinational corporations. But I guarantee you that the players at a high level are not only dealing with above the line industry and economy, but below the line industry and economy. So we're talking dark web stuff, drugs, prostitution, any number of salacious and quote-unquote illegal activities. Of course they're profiting on that stuff. You'd be naive to think not. Am I correct? There have been rumors about a major billionaire in this country for many years that, the guy I'm talking about, the guy that's always eating an ice cream, that guy. So there have been rumors about him for many years that he's actually the capo of the Mexican drug trade in this country. Yep. That if you do business, if you want to do Mexican drug trade business, you've got to go to the ice cream man, who apparently eats 20,000 calories a day of just the most horrendous food. And yet, he's able to not only stay alive, he's 89 years old, Ice Cream Man is. He not only is he able to stay alive, but he's also able to stay healthy, for the most part, right? Gee, we wonder why. Wonder why that happens. Anyway, these are things. The diet thing, that's not what I've heard. That's true. Eats 20,000. He says he eats like a kid, and that's what keeps him young. Mm-hmm. Maybe he eats we're not going to go there. So Soros is really just the front man in a lot of ways. But we're going to go with the Soros narrative, because this is what Alex Jones likes to do. Alex Jones loves to use Soros, and he's the mastermind of the globalists and their planned takeover and your communistic putsch that is coming to America soon. It's either communism or fascism. These are the two models. So I was telling you about that story that movie last night, yesterday that I saw the night before, and I was a communist for the FBI. That's the name of the movie. It's on Turner Classic Movies in the streamable section. So what's really interesting is they kind of reveal in this movie how these operations work. So, for instance, let's say somebody like Yvette Falarka, who is the head of By Any Means Necessary, gets arrested. What they'll do is they will raise funds for Yvette Falarka to get out of jail and deal with her crisis, her legal crisis, and they'll rig it because they have a number of people that are in positions already. They're embedded. They're embedded in the judiciary. They're embedded in the local mayoral systems. They're all over the place. So getting Yvette Falarca out of a bad situation, or a situation where she's been charged with some kind of crime, whether it's defacing public property or defacing private property, whatever it is. But they'll go out and they'll raise like $20,000, $30,000 for her defense fund. And usually they'll use about maybe $2,500 or $3,000, and then they have these excess funds left over. This is shown in this movie where these fundraisers, and by the way, that the new version of that obviously is the GoFundMe stuff. You know, it's fascinating to watch. Anyway, but the other thing that this movie exposes, which is along these lines, like they need more money, right? They need more money. So in order to get more money, there's this one guy at one of their commie meetings, and they suggest to him, they said, hey, you know, he's a German guy, he's in the German part of Pennsylvania. He says, hey, they say, hey, why don't you whip that fascist stuff up again? And the guy's like, oh, you know, I don't do that anymore. I was a fascist 10 years ago. So now he goes from fascism to communism, which is quite interesting in a lot of ways, both extreme ideologies. And they said, well, no, you don't really have to do it. You're just doing it for the party. You're gonna whip it up, and we're going to have more divide and conquer, and we're going to, again, kind of amass a legal fund for you so we can get more money out of these people. And it's just, you watch this movie, and you can just see these tactics and how they unfold. And we have these large foundations, like the Clinton Foundation, where they're kind of based on that model. You know, look at Haiti and all the money they raised for Haiti. You know, they just made a few tweaks to the model instead of coming to the defense of somebody that was arrested or imprisoned and getting money for that. They just decided to go for the big ticket items like disaster relief. Anyway, so George Soros has pumped $1 billion into the Open Foundation, and he's going to theoretically finance and fund whatever's going to happen next on November 4th. Now, I have not done the astrology for November 4th, but I will. What I do want to look at today is I want to look at events through history today that have occurred. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes we can find some interesting pieces that we can kind of, you know, glue to this pastiche of information in which we can begin to see a larger pattern unfold. One of the things that's quite interesting is that on November 4th, 1952, the government here, the United States government, established the NSA. Isn't that interesting? So the NSA, the National Security Agency, will have its anniversary on the 4th of November, which is also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with the Taurus full moon. That's interesting. So I don't know if we can, draw any kind of significance out of that, but I think it's interesting that the NSA was started on November 4th. A number of other things have happened on November 4th. There was a revolt in 1868 in Cuba against Spain. That was the 10 Years' War. There was the Battle of Jacksonville in 1864. That's the American Civil War, where Confederate troops bombarded a Union supply base to destroy millions of dollars in material. So that's a kind of a big Civil War event. There was the rebellion of Tupac Amaru II against Spanish rule in the Viceroyalty of Peru. So that's, there is some revolutionary energy associated with the day. In the 80 Years' War, way back in 1576, Spain captures Antwerp. After 3 days, the city is nearly destroyed. In 1956, Soviet troops entered Hungary to end the Hungarian Revolution against the Soviet Union. That started on October 23rd, so it didn't start there, but it ended on November 4th. What else do we have here? In 1970, the United States turns control of the air base at Binh Thuy in the Mekong Delta over to South Vietnam. That's interesting. In 1970, Salvador Allende, he's a piece of work, huh? Salvador Allende became the first president of Chile who was a Marxist. He was the first Marxist to become president of a Latin American country through open elections. There we go. Let's see, what else do we have here? Here we go, the Iran hostage crisis. How about this? Ding, 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 ding. Here's another interesting one. A mob of Iranians, mostly students, overruns the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and takes 90 hostages, 53 of whom are American. That's a November 4th date. Okay? And a year later, Ronald Reagan was elected the 40th president of the United States. That's on November 4th. A bit of a revolution. That was like a conservative revolution, correct? In 1995, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by an extremist Israeli, November 4th. And in 2008, Barack Obama became the first person of biracial or African American descent to be elected president of the United States. How about that? That's on November 4th. That was when Obama assumed the reins of power, control, and government. By the way, the Obama Foundation made its opening. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it made a big splash, huge splash. Chance the Rapper was there. The music group The National was there. They did yoga, they did meditation. It was all about hope. It was all about tapping into the collective dream. So I would say it was probably a very new agey safe space if you wanted to go check that out. It probably was not cheap. So the Obama Foundation now starting to make its presence felt as kind of an alternative option for people that want to check into more of a feel-good, hopey, kind of new agey, meditative, yogic option for reality. So keep your eyes on that, see where that thing is going to go. They just did it the other day. What else? Anything else interesting? Well, I think really the biggest pieces here are the creation of the NSA, the storming of the U.S. Embassy in Iran for the hostage crisis, and to some extent even the election of Barack Obama. And maybe piggybacking off that energy for November 4th, some birthdays for November 4th. I think Kathy Griffin was born on November 4th. There she is, 1960. Same age as me, Kathy Griffin, November 4th. Maybe she'll be out there leading the revolution with another bloody head. Kathy Griffin and Lisa Bloom, man, they're just going at it, aren't they? That's fascinating to watch. Absolutely fascinating as both sides begin to consume and devour their own. What else was I looking at today that I thought was interesting? All of this really began the day after the election. Matthew McConaughey's birthday is November 4th. He's been doing a lot of commercials lately. He doesn't look well. He does not look well. I have to say that Matthew McConaughey looks like somebody who might have cancer or AIDS. Looks really gaunt. You can see that on those commercials he does. I think that they're for Buick, aren't they? Or Lincoln. I think it's Lincoln. He just lives up the road from me. I never see him, but I know he lives up the road from me. So one of the things that also crossed my radar, besides this, well, okay, so where did it all start? This really all started the day after the election. when Hillary Clinton basically gave her speech. It wasn't her concession speech. She never really gave a concession speech. It wasn't really that at all. It was more along the lines of, hey, you know, we got to continue to fight the good fight and all that other BS. But you notice that they were both wearing purple. And this is where this whole talk of the Purple Revolution came about. And I did a piece on my website that links the Purple Revolution to Prince, and of course the Purple One and his band, The Revolution, and a lot of really interesting syncs that had to do with the death of Prince, which is connected to the Queen. And there's a lot of really interesting pieces that suggest that Prince was, in many ways, a ritual sacrifice for the Purple Revolution itself. So really, what we're looking at here on November 4th, and remember, I believe the election last year was what, November 10th? Was that what it was? Or it was the 11th, 9/11. So that's really just 7 days out from November 4th. But right after that, 9/12 was when Hillary finally got up and declared that, well, she may be defeated, but the fight goes on. That's when I think it all started. I mean, some people could say that it started beforehand when they were trying to get into the Electoral College and all the other stuff that wanted to disrupt this process of democracy. And I have this feeling that in many ways that the process itself was actually probably worth more than the actual result. And what I mean by that is that even if they could not stop Trump by going after the Electoral College or having the election results challenged by Jill Stein, that it didn't really matter. But what mattered was that there was a disruptive energy that was being injected and infused into the body politique and into the American public. I think that was really more kind of important to a specific page in a playbook. If they got Trump out, that would have been great. It would have been gravy on top of it. But I don't think they really thought that they could get him out. Now that I think about this and look at it in retrospect, it feels to me more like a shock and awe kind of tactic. And they've been basically promoting shock and awe ever since. And it's fascinating to see kind of the effects of this, because I go to a lot of sites, and I'm all over the place with the sites I go to. And I go to a fair amount of sports sites. And of course, politics has crept into sports in a pretty significant way, especially with the NFL and to some extent the NBA. You won't find that in baseball. You won't find it in baseball. Baseball is kind of the inviolate sport, and this was a great fall for baseball with the World Series, because while the NFL was stumbling all over itself, Major League Baseball was setting all kinds of records for offense and excitement. And there was one guy that got on his knee during the protests or during the baseball season. It's a guy by the name of Bruce Maxwell. He's a catcher for the Oakland A's. And Maxwell got on. It was a big deal. It's like, oh boy, here we go now. Baseball's next. Well, it wasn't really next. One guy did. But what happened to Bruce Maxwell on the backside of that was bizarre and strangely fascinating. He's from Alabama, I believe, or Arkansas, one of those places, one of those A states. Not Alaska, but Alabama. Went down there. I think it's Alabama. Anyway, he was down there, and he says that he was refused service at a restaurant because he knelt. Oh boy, it became a big Yahoo man needs to be blown up. Anyway, it became a big Yahoo story. Oh, look at Bruce Maxwell. Oh, here we go. Another. Oh boy, here's the narrative. These crackers down in the South, they didn't like him. They refused him service. Well, really what came out was that Maxwell had a minor with him who could not provide an adequate ID so that they could drink. Sounds a little bit different, doesn't it? That's in the story, and the restaurant stands by the story. So, okay. Move on. maybe two dissenting points of view. We'll never really find out who's right or wrong. It's a court of public opinion. But then a week later, he's in Arizona, another one of the A states. He's in Arizona, and apparently he decides that he thought it'd be a really good idea to take out a firearm and brandish a firearm when a woman delivering pizza came to his house. Now, I don't know why you'd want to take out a gun and threaten a pizza delivery person. Was it because they got the order wrong? Did they forget to put the mushrooms on? Is that what happened? So, of course, Mr. Bruce Maxwell wound up in jail. They came and got him. And there's his mugshot on TV or the internet. So all of a sudden he goes from the Rosa Parks of baseball to hanging out in a jail in Maricopa County. Oh boy, interesting stuff. Anyway, it's good fall for baseball. I'm not saying that's part of it. People can do whatever they want. If you choose to kneel in a football game and fans choose not to watch it, that's their prerogative. That's their prerogative. But I feel like, and this is where I feel like the NFL has, and the teams have really not really done a service to the whole idea of serving their fan base or serving their customer, just in general. If your customer doesn't like something, let's say, and I've used this analogy before, let's say you go to Starbucks, and let's say Starbucks is in a liberal part of Austin. Okay, I'm flipping the script here. And the person who's serving you your coffee says, "Hey, have you ever thought about how many babies are being aborted today? Have you ever thought about that? Well, maybe you should give it some thought. Oh, and you can wait over here for your drink. Because that would be completely outside the lines for a Starbucks employee, right? It would be incredibly outside the lines. And if that continued to happen on a daily basis, reminding people or asking people if they really thought about how many unborn babies were going to die that day, do you think Starbucks would keep that employee around? No, they wouldn't. Now, if the employee said, "Hey, have you ever thought about how great it is for choice, for a woman to have a choice? Isn't that a wonderful thing?" It's probably something that Starbucks goes, hey, look, we kind of support that. Because Starbucks has encouraged their employees to talk about social issues. Right? It's happened. But this is what I'm talking about, because that Starbucks would not tolerate that, because in that part of Austin, say the east side of Austin, let's say there's a Starbucks over there, or let's say the Starbucks is in Berkeley, or let's say the Starbucks is in New York City, or, wherever we want to place it, where there's going to be this contrasting base of consumers. They wouldn't tolerate it. And football, unlike basketball, is a very different demographic. Basketball tends to be urban. And football tends to be viewed, watched, and experienced vicariously by a mostly non-urban audience. It is probably the demographic is trending upwards in terms of its viewership. So we're probably talking post-40s, and I don't know if we could break it down racially, but I would assume, I don't know what the statistics are, but I would assume that the viewership would lean more towards kind of white middle class, working class with football. I'm making a leap here in reasoning. That's not to exclude any other group, but I'm just trying to, and maybe I'll come back tomorrow and look at the statistics. But if that's the case, and that's your clientele, then why would you allow people to, for whatever reason, disrespect the flag, whatever reason, why would you allow them to do that if you knew that it pissed off the majority of your clientele? See, that's where I think the NFL went wrong. It didn't go wrong from a model where they said, hey, you can't protest because theoretically you got a First Amendment right and you can do whatever you want, but it's a business. And that's where I believe that they went wrong. They were not responsive and respectful to the business or their business partners who are their paying customers, who pay a hell of a lot of money to watch those games in person. You go to an NFL game, it is not cheap. You're paying for a PSA. You're paying for the PSA is the right to buy a ticket, not even the ticket itself. So you're buying a license to own a ticket. Think about that. And then you get to buy the ticket, and then you got to pay for parking and all the other stuff that goes along. It's not a cheap sport to go view and witness. Papa John's has come out, and they've had a huge loss in their profits. And they are the pizza of the NFL. You watch an NFL game, and Papa John's is plastered all over their NFL commercials or their commercials. They partner with NFL players like Peyton Manning, Deshaun Watson. So it's a big deal, and they're claiming that all of a sudden their losses are tied to what's happening with the league. It's the first major advertiser that has come out and said that the league needs to do a better job because we're losing money. It's a very interesting kind of dynamic. On the one hand, would it be so bad if the NFL deconstructed? Would it be so bad? I don't think so. I don't think so. It would get us out of this kind of vicarious relationship with the sport, which consumes a lot of time in people's lives on various levels. So it may not be a bad thing, to be honest with you. You know, because it's one of those deals, right? When we get into Chiron and Aries and we look at this whole idea of what it is to be a man. And if men are projecting vicariously onto these other men, you know, who are displaying kind of this a certain archetypal expression around being a man, then if that's not there, then it comes back to the men that are witnessing this vicariously. So, hey, maybe you need to be, you know, kind of a version of that. And like you don't need to be somebody who's 300 pounds and out bashing heads, but maybe there's a part of that we have vicariously, put out there and left behind, and that we need to bring that into our lives as men. That is not a form of displaced projection. That wouldn't be a bad thing. Now, on the other hand, part of the goal, the stated goal of a communist program, especially if it's, this country, but any other countries, that what they want to do is they want to destroy a country's institutions. Because if you destroy the institution, then you destroy the identity of that country. Case in point with the statuary being taken down. That's a perfect example. Football is another case in point. That destroying football is a way to destroy an American institution. So that's the flip side of it. That is kind of like a version of subversive warfare. And some people say, well, that's not bad, let them do it. It's okay, maybe, and I think ultimately, if you have to weigh it out, right, that it may not be a bad thing. Because, again, as men, we may have to really reassess how we spend our time, energy, and project into that world and reclaim it. So this is an ongoing thing with the NFL, and it hasn't stopped. And you have Bob McNair, who owns the Houston Texans, came out and said at the owners' meeting that we cannot let the prisoners run the prison, which was a kind of an unfortunate choice of words, and he's had to pay for it. And of course, we live in such a delicate news cycle, such an absolutely delicate news cycle now, where if you just step outside the lines, even by inches, there's a great chance that you'll be nailed to a cross for it. There's no margin for human error at this point if we're being held to that politically correct standard, which is almost nearly impossible to achieve unless you toe the party line. You see, unless you say the right things, which are coming out of the one part of the dominant dialectic. There's two sides to it now. There are two sides playing out this struggle between which side is going to dominate over the other. And by the way, I'm not sure. Alex Jones talks on and on and on about smashing them, about smashing the left and victory. And you know what? I'm not sure that ultimately that's a good thing. I think what's happened with the left is it's metastasized and it's become something of a grotesquerie. And at one point, it actually kind of provided an interesting counterbalance that looked out for people's needs, right? If they're just being trampled on by corporations, if they're just being trampled on by an unchecked government, that kind of relationship was mostly represented by the left. They abandoned that. And what they did is they just decided to get deeply immersed in identity politics. But I'm not in favor of completely eradicating it. Because what happens when we have one party or one ideology that is dominant without any kind of natural or unnatural checks and balances? That ideology can become very dangerous. And I don't care what side it is. I don't care if it's the left or the right. If the left's unchecked, they're dangerous. If the right's unchecked, the right is dangerous. We need the checks and balances. They're important. The problem is that the checks and balances have been escalated to a point where, we're continually at this level of crises. That's the problem, is that everything's been so escalated. When it wasn't as escalated, we had this kind of natural kind of peace going on. Peace, I mean being P-I-C-E. So I'm not in favor of completely eradicating the left. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, it's kind of like when you introduce a new species to an environment that becomes the apex species. And what happens to the environment? It's like kudzu, right? You introduce kudzu into the South and it takes over everything because it has nothing to keep it from spreading. Or you look at the Nile perch. It's another example. There are many examples. So I'm not necessarily in favor of completely smashing the left. I think a lot of the institutions that have been taken over by the left, particularly higher education, really need to be revamped. Because this is where we lose. I think education needs to be revamped completely in general. That's where I think that the left gained a bit too much real estate of our kids and programming our kids. Speaking of programming, real quick, California, if you live in California, you're being programmed now to accept 12 more cents at the pump, a new tax, 12 more cents. That's not insignificant, 12 cents. You add that up over the course of a year, you think, 12 cents is nothing. Well, where's the 12 cents going to, by the way? Of course, it'll have some kind of, it's going to this, it's going to that. But really, that tax is going to escalate. Because ultimately what they want to do is they want to take you out of your gas-driven cars. And they want to make it, let's just go electric. Let's just go all electric. And that's part of the programming. And we're going to see more and more of this as we see price hikes across the board, whether that's for gas or insurance, cars themselves. And it's part of the modification and the programming for us to get rid of those nasty cars. Get rid of them. Yeah. It's a wonderful world we're living in, actually. Because guess what we have? We have the axiom of choice. We can look at these things and we can consent to them or not. One of the things, if you don't like California, if you don't like what's going on, guess what? You can leave. You can leave. That's part of the level of consent. It could be that's an extreme level of it, but that's where it's at. We always have the axiom of choice. And we don't know it often, but it's there. You know, my father used to tell me, a long time ago when I was a kid, he used to tell me, you know, you have the choice to make your life whatever it is. You have the choice to apply meaning to that if you don't, or not. That's your choice. But you always have a choice. And when I was a kid, I was really kind of confused by that. I understood it on one level, but, you know, when you're 13, 14 years old, you're going through some cross-wiring. But it occurred to me, again, I talked about this the other day, it occurred to me that we are always at choice. You know, we have a choice of, you know, looking at the sky that's gray. Like yesterday, I had a client. And she asked me how I was. I said, I'm great. And then she had heard the show, and she said, well, you said it was really dark and dreary there. I said, well, I can't let that determine how I feel. You know, I have a choice. Am I going to allow the dark and dreary sky impact my mood? Or am I going to say, hey, or am I going to experience the potential for having a great connection between me and my client in this moment? Where am I choosing to put my attention in that moment? Consciously. I'm choosing to put my intention and attention towards my client, because in my mind, in my body, I am great. In that moment, I'm great. There's nothing else that's going to get in the way between me and that moment, whether it's the sky. Now, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult. We have to deal with things that are more than just a gray sky in our lives. Sometimes we deal with really intense material. And you can say, you know, I'm hurting today, but life is good. I mean, that's one way in which we can approach this. We always have some level of choice. And remember that, you know, this is where we get really crossed up in a lot of ways. Whatever's happening out there in the world, and some of it's really tough. You know, if you're living in Santa Rosa, that's not an easy reality. If you're living in East St. Louis, that's not an easy reality. I'm sorry, it's just tough. You're born into more difficult circumstances and situations than other people. But even then, and I know I sound like an ogre, but even then, there is the axiom of choice, and this is what we have to learn. And it's one of our greatest responsibilities, and one of the greatest things that we can bestow upon ourselves as a gift. And it's liberating. It is so liberating when you say, I choose in this moment to be X. Now, it may take you a while to get to X. You know, there's the saying, you fake it till you make it. But you will get there. You will get to X. This is an important thing to understand. I also had another client, yes, I think that might have been the same client. She said, you know, I really like how you tie things together at the end of the show. And, you know, have a more kind of positive message and a more positive note. And I think that's important. I think it's really important, because sometimes we'll get into these very deep discussions, we'll get into deep material, and it's just like another open wound. And I do my best to seal things up at the end of each show. And I do it for guess who? I do it for me, and I do it for you. Because if I leave this show and I haven't cinched something up and walked away from this as a positive experience, and I'm walking away into my day having descended into the darkness and unraveling material at times that can be very disturbing for people, I don't want to carry that around. You know, this is a time where I can bring it out into the open. This is as much a part of my healing, and hopefully yours as well. And then we bring it back. We bring it back to center. And we see the events. We do our best to understand the events and the phenomena and whatever it is. And some of it, again, is really way out there, really dark. But we do our best to descend into it, pull it apart, see it. And then we choose. We choose a higher vibration, or we choose a higher way in which to move into our day and interact with other people. Because we don't give it power ultimately. This is part of the process, is demystifying the power of the darkness. And if we can do that, then we can do a lot. You know, this is the constant kind of reprogramming of fear and anxiety in our lives, while at the same time being able to look at what's happening and be aware. It's probably one of the most primary functions as humans that we can do. And then we become responsible for our own spiritual upliftment. And that is choice. What do you put in your mouth? What do you put in your stomach? What kind of chemicals are you putting on your body? What businesses are you supporting? I canceled my subscription to Netflix because I was just tired of paying them $9.95 a month and watching the programming that they're using my money for. I wasn't happy about it. It's like, I'm taking control. I'm taking control of that. That's my choice. That's my choice. And did I walk away, fist pumping in the air? Yeah, got those Netflix mofos. I'll teach them. Not really. I didn't have some kind of, real sense of grand vindication. No, but it's just like, hey, I don't want to support this. And so these are choices we make. They're choices, and they're important. They're important choices. And if you add them all up, what they can do is they can lead you to a life where you're living from your center, not the center of the world, but from your center, which is always a pretty good place to live from. All right, why don't we end up there, wrap it up there. Tomorrow, Patrick from Citizen Zen Health is going to be spending some time with me. We're going to talk today, and he's had some breakthroughs, some fascinating breakthroughs that he's going to share with us. And I'm going to give you the big tease here. Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go. Nibiru, fifth dimension, alternate Earth. That's all I'm going to say. All right, so join me tomorrow for another edition of Free Association Radio. And that's going to be the Friday Farcast, and we're going to go far out tomorrow, I guarantee you. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a great day.